Hello and welcome to another episode of the Wisdom of Friends podcast. Thank you for tuning in. If this is your first time listening, then thanks for coming. This is a podcast where you get to learn more about your friends and community, their wisdom, their trials and tribulations, timeless insights, and their secrets. Now, let's get into the show. Please welcome your host, Cal Arras.
Hello, folks. Welcome to another episode of Wisdom of Friends. I'm your host, Cal Arras, and today I'm really excited to be introducing you to a good friend of mine. His name is Michael Yichao. Now, Yichao is a writer and improviser living in Seattle. Currently a narrative designer for the game Guild Wars 2, Yichao also was a writer for the game Magic, The Gathering, and for Disney Imagineering. After getting a BA in English and Theater and an MFA in Acting from California Institute of the Arts, Yichao's career has led him from playwriting to performing to writing for theme parks to writing for TV and to writing in the gaming industry. In addition to his writing work, Yichao also performs and teaches improvisational theater and comedy with Jet City Improv, regularly performing with the company as well as his own troupes and shows. As a playwright, his plays have been produced in cities across the US and U.K, and he's also currently directing Jet City Improv season opener Dystopia, the musical, a fully improvised musical set in a post-apocalyptic world. His performance work and his writing frequently influences and informs one another. Friends, in this episode, Yichao talks about a journey of an artist, what it takes to follow your passion. How do you find your passion? And what does it mean to be successful in an artistic world? This is one of the very fascinating conversations I've had in a long time, and I hope you enjoy it. So please pull up a chair and listen in. And without further ado, let's welcome the one and only Yichao. So good afternoon, Yichao. Welcome to another episode of Wisdom of Friends show. I'm really excited that you took some time to be on this program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and let me start off with my first impressions of you, Yichao. This was almost like 6 months ago when I enrolled for a improv comedy workshop that you had led here in Seattle. It was part of the Jet City Improv production. And part of my reasoning for joining this or taking this workshop was, since I work in this business and technology and corporate arena, I was referred to by one of my friends that would be a great asset to have when it comes to making business decisions with conviction, and to be able to just laugh at yourself, not being so serious and take it all life does not have to be so significant even if you're in the world of business, and you can laugh at yourself. And then the third thing really was about how to read a room, or how to collaborate by just picking up the cues. So these are some of the skills that I was told that, an improv workshop would definitely enhance. And guess what? I mean, your workshop that you led was so fantastic that I know, and I can probably speak for everybody in that class, that we had such a great time. And I know most of us registered for the next session in that series in that workshop. So I just want to thank you for that. And I think the biggest takeaway from me from taking that workshop was how to loosen up and shake it up and really have a good time. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm glad you had a good time. I've been doing improv for a while now, just a little over 10 years. And I've got to say, the thing I like about it the most is that not only is it fun in and of itself, but it's just a great way to, be able to think on your feet and empower you to have confidence. And so I'm glad you got some of that out of the class.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the ways we kick off our program here is by asking our guests a very simple question, and that is, what's your favorite quote or philosophy that you live by, and how have you applied it to your life?
That's a great question. I think the one that comes immediately to mind is lean into the fear. And it sounds a little cheesy. It sounds a little, very inspirational poster, the kind of quote you'd see on top of a picture of the beach or a cat hanging onto a branch, right? But to me, leaning into the fear really just means finding something that scares you a little bit, that challenges you, and going for it and taking the leap and trying the new thing. For me, this has played out in a lot of different ways in my life. Everything from, applying for a program that I'm a little bit nervous about or don't think I would get into, or going for a job that I'm like, oh, that feels like just a little out of my reach, or attempting to put together a project or something like that I think, oh, this is going to be a little bigger than I've ever done before. I'm not sure I'm going to do it right or do it well, and then going for it and trying it. And I found that more often than not, your own ability to achieve a thing that you think is slightly out of your reach is quite. You're able to do that more often than you think, and even if you fall short, you've pushed yourself to try something new and grow as a person, which I find is ultimately the thing that helps me get better at whatever it is I'm trying to do.
No, that is so great. I like that about leaning into your fear and just going for your dreams. And as I was researching your background a little bit, and I came across your blog where you have this amazing post that you recently published. It's called "Don't Follow Your Passion," which is, and I think to give it a context, I just want to make sure that, you talk about, don't just want your dream job. Start doing the thing. Don't wait for permission. Just do it. Don't chase passions. Allow them to grow as you do the work. That's such a beautiful sentiment. And, one of the questions that we often get from our audiences is, how does one go about following or finding a calling or passion? Do you have any tips on that?
Yeah, I think, and this is definitely an idea that I came up with, but something that I've learned over time in my life, and also had great mentors kind of tell me, which is there is a tendency for us to say, oh, find your passion and find the thing you really love, and that'll give you so much direction in life, and you just have to chase that, and it'll be great, and it'll be perfect. And really, that's not it isn't complete in terms of advice, right? It's kind of just a piece of the thing, in the sense that, for me at least, the thing that I've discovered that I really love and ultimately drives everything I do is I love telling stories, and that mostly manifests itself as in terms of writing and performing. And over time, I've gotten better at those things. I've gotten experience. I've gotten chances to work on some pretty cool and big projects. But that didn't start from me discovering, this is the one thing that I do. It started from me being, this is interesting. I'm going to try it out. I'm going to be really bad at it, and then and then keep working at it until I was better. In terms of like finding a passion, I think sometimes people, when they hear that, they think, oh, if I try it, it's like love at first sight. I'm going to know right away this is the thing I should be doing with my life. And very rarely is it that. Usually it's like, oh, this is all right, or oh, that was kind of interesting. And it's a thing of you've just got to give yourself the opportunity to try different things, and allow yourselves to be bad at the thing you're trying, and allow yourself the time to get better at it and discover if this is something that you find enjoyment from, right? I think that's kind of the arena that I would say to start in.
No, that is so great. And actually, I was recently reading a book by this author called Cal Newport. And, he's written a couple of bestsellers, New York Times bestsellers. One is called Be So Good That They Cannot Ignore You. And the other one is Deep Work. And his primary philosophy as far as finding your passion is concerned is very similar to what you just stated is, oftentimes there is this misconceived notion that, you got to follow your bliss. And I think it came from Joseph Campbell, which kind of like has its right context. I don't want to kind of like beat it down, but I think in today's day and age with so much of shifts happening all around us in the business and technology, and I think there's so many opportunities that, if you don't tap into it, you probably won't even know what's going on out there or what possible opportunity cost you're missing out on if you don't even dabble into it. And I think once you pick something that catches your interest, as you said, and then kind of like start working on it, and as you start getting some kind of competency and proficiency, it automatically starts developing a passion within you that you can continue to work towards mastery of that craft. So no, that's so great. And Yichao, I'm looking at your background here, and you have such a eclectic background, I must say. I mean, you're a writer, you're an actor, you're an artist, and I'm just really fascinated by the choices you've made with your career. And I want to kind of like take a moment to walk down the memory lane here for a second. So what I'm curious about is what did your parents do, and how did that shape your life?
So my mom and my birth dad split up when I was very young. So I grew up with just my mom. My dad kind of left the picture pretty early. And my mom was a computer engineer. She had gotten her first degree in China in aeronautic engineering. She wanted to be a pilot.
Wow.
But then she needed glasses, and she ended up not being able to be a pilot, but she taught at a pilot school for a while. And then things in China were changing. The world was changing. And she's like, I think, one, I want to go to the US and study. Two, I want to go into a field that I think is growing right now, which is computer science. So she came to the US, got her master's degree in computer science, and has been working at Intel for the bulk of her career. And so she's a very analytical-minded person and just awesome, and kind of really worked very hard. Now she is she's a senior engineer for them, and I think recently she's moved more onto like the program management side of things. But yeah, so that's my parents' background, and it was really fun because even though my mom, is very much a hard sciences background, when I started developing an interest in, the liberal arts and in writing, in storytelling, and when I started college and decided I wanted to study theater and English, my mom was actually really supportive, which was awesome. The stereotype of the Asian kid is, all their parents want them to grow up to be doctors and lawyers, right? And that wasn't really the case for me. I was very fortunate. My mom was always like, I worked really hard to be good in the field that I'm in, not because it's the thing that is, makes me super happy every day getting to work on computer science, but because I wanted to support my family. And part of that is supporting you to do the things you love and giving you the space to do the things you love. So she was always very supportive of me pursuing my interests, which was really, really fortunate growing up, because it makes a huge difference in terms of building that confidence doing what you ultimately want to do.
No, that's so great. And I can kind of like resonate with that because me being from an Indian background, you're absolutely right. It's like the focus always was on education, and, either you end up becoming an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer. And, and oftentimes, and I think the intention behind choosing those kind of professions is kind of like pretty good, because they want to make sure that, your kids can get a good job and they can make a good living and support the family and that kind of thing. But what I think, what also happens in the process is, sometimes the kids are not meant for that kind of profession. They have a different passion or they have a different calling, and then oftentimes they end up with a midlife crisis and like try to choose a profession, and and oftentimes it's like too late in the game to like do a fresh start, but it's never too late. And in my case, I studied engineering and went on to do business management, and then I found out that I have a real passion for the creative arts, and so I ended up also becoming an author and a professional speaker, and now I'm doing podcasting. So who would have thought that I would be doing podcasting now? So no, this is really great. And so what I'm curious about, Michael Yichao, is that did you know, like, when did you start knowing that, it was the creative field was your calling? Like, was there a particular moment about writing, acting, and becoming a part of the performing arts that spoke to you? Or how did you know that was the major you wanted to choose?
Yeah. So When I started college, the major that I started in was English and education. At that point, I knew I liked writing. It was my favorite class in school, all throughout high school. I loved reading. I was a voracious reader as a kid. And I was like, I think I want to be a novelist when I grow up. It'll be great. And then my first year of college, I took a theater class, an acting class, just for fun, because I had done theater once or twice when I was a kid, and I enjoyed it. And I was like, oh, this will be a fun thing to do as an extracurricular. And by the end of my first semester of college, I had switched my major over to English and theater. I just really loved it and was very excited by it. It was also scary for me because whereas in high school I was very much the stereotypical like nerdy valedictorian, do it by the books academic kid, and where my focus was in the sciences and maths, where there's always a right answer or a wrong answer. What thrilled me and terrified me about theater and writing was there is no subjective best a lot of the times, and I had just felt like I had no idea what I was doing, and then I didn't know how to get good, right? Like with sciences and math classes, it was like, okay, if I study and I learn the formulas and I apply the right things, I know how to gain more knowledge and be good in this course. In acting, it was like, okay, I can learn technique and try different things, but so much of it is more ephemeral, and to me it was more challenging and hard in a very much different way than a lot of the things that engaged me in high school. So that kind of pulled my interest in, and I started kind of diving really deep into theater and playwriting as well. So.
Oh, that's so great. So one of the questions I do have is, having interviewed many guests on this show now, one of the through line, if you will, that we've noticed is oftentimes that, these successful people like yourself in this particular field often go through like challenges and they somehow don't take it as a failure, but they kind of like use that as a stepping stone to move on to something even greater or bigger, or expand their capacity to take on bigger challenges, if you will. So my question is, when you look back at your life up until now, what would you say were one or two turning points in your life or challenges in your life, and what lessons did those situations provide you that helped you navigate life as you move forward?
Yeah, I think so many, right? I think the thing is, when you're faced with a big challenge or a potential defeat, the question is, do you read it as, oh, I failed and I should turn around because clearly this was in the way? Or do you read it as, oh, this didn't work out, but now I know all the ways it doesn't work. I can try it again and be so much better equipped to give it another shot. It's a lot easier to talk about that and say like, oh, of course I would choose to do it again when you're far away from it and you're not experiencing the fresh pain of whatever failure or challenge you faced. But ultimately the difference of being able to grow in whatever field you're working in is that willingness to kind of dive back in after you've suffered that defeat. I think there's two stories I want to tell really quick in this regard. One is, I think one of the most formative things I ever got to do was attend a program called National Theater Institute at the O'Neill Theater. And that was a program that was this theater intensive program. It was 7 days a week with classes for 10 hours, and then we would start doing homework. And actually the biggest learnings I got out of that wasn't anything specifically about theater, but rather that program taught me, one, I could do more in more limited time than I thought possible. An example was I am terrible at memorizing as an actor, and trying to memorize a lot of lines is really hard for me. And I was given a performance where I had 9 hours to rehearse, and I had to memorize like 5 or 6 pages of text and deliver it in this massive monologue. And I was like, this is impossible. This is completely something I can't do. But because I had to do it, I did it. I managed to do it. And so it empowered, like just having that experience empowered me to be like, where I think my limits are usually inaccurate. And if I push myself, I can get more done in less time than I think is possible. And the other biggest learning is in that same vein of like things that I think are impossible are probably actually within my reach. In terms of, we had a class where we had to pitch starting a theater company, and we had to use our actual hometowns of like where we would start the company and do actual research into spaces and venues and like plan this thing out in a way that it's like, hey, this is actually doable. And for me as a 19-year-old kid, the idea of starting a company seemed impossible. But over the course of this class, where it was just broken down into steps and broken down into things to look at and consider, I was like, oh, I think I can actually do this, right? It's the same thing of like when I started and I was majoring in theater and I was thinking, oh, I'm going to become an actor. I always say, oh, I'm an aspiring actor. Someday I'll be an actor. And it's giving yourself that permission and realizing that you are whatever you are wanting to do the instant you start trying to do it. You don't have to wait for someone's permission or wait for yourself to be good enough to be whatever it is you want to be. You are that thing once you start trying, and you're just not a very good actor maybe, but you're an actor, and you're just going to keep getting better if you give yourself permission to call yourself by the thing you're doing. And it's an incredibly important mindset thing of thinking of yourself as the thing you're trying to accomplish. Because until you think of yourself as that, no one else is going to look at you as that thing, right? So that the program taught me those two big lessons. In terms of actual challenges where I failed, there's so many to list, right? A great one is I got called into audition for an ABC show. So this was for a recurring guest star role on a TV show. And I got called in by one of the writers on this show. I had met her via another project. And she's like, hey, I think you'd be a great fit for this character I wrote. So basically, a friend of mine wrote a character for a TV show that she thought I would be good at. And I got called into audition for the show. And I was like, this is amazing. As an actor, this is a dream, right? I go in, I audition, I prepared, I did my homework, but I didn't prepare enough, right? And I had an okay audition, but because of weird circumstances, things got moved around. I feel like overall the impression was mediocre, and I didn't get the part, even though all these things were set up in my favor to get it. And it was just such a great lesson for me of like, you've always got to work harder than you think you do, and never take anything for granted. And hey, these things are going to happen. You're going to have seemingly everything set up for perfection, and then it's all going to fall apart. And guess what? Tomorrow you wake up and you go to your next audition and you keep doing it. Like that's all there is to it. And there's so many points in my career where that's been true, whether it was acting, whether it was like a big writing project that was going really well and then things kind of fell apart with funding or whatever it is. Ultimately it's just learning that those heartbreak moments, you can either throw in the towel and be like, well, that's been fun, or you can be like, it's part of what you do. Keep going, keep trucking along. So
no, I like that. I love that, because I think the couple of points you mentioned here that are so it's like it's going to make a terrific difference for our audience here. I think one of them that you talked about is how we as just as human beings, we are so poor at making assessment of what's possible, right? In the sense that we overestimate what we can get done in a year, but underestimate what we can get done in a decade. And I think that comes from a quote from Tony Robbins. And I think that's so beautiful. I mean, and the other point of that is also that once we see that it's possible, it's in the realm of possibility, as you mentioned, that, putting together a pitch for starting a company in your hometown and doing the actual research and seeing that now it's doable, that gives you a sense of confidence and a belief that, hey, this which was totally impossible before, now I can do it. And I think those two things are so remarkable. And I think the most important point of it is, you gotta go for it with 100% effort and not just slack off. And especially those championship moments, like your audition call, they come unexpectedly and out of the blues. And if you're not ready for it, and if you're not really, play that final Grand Slam championship match, if you will, it's like, that's definitely a lesson that we can all take, that, you gotta always be preparing and learning and growing. And no, that's so great. I think, and I think also one other point I would like to make for our audience here is, that belief system, right? It's that Roger Bannister analogy where, nobody thought he could run a mile under a minute or whatever, and then he did it, and after that, before, like 12 years before, like nobody thought it was possible. And he did it, and within 12 months, like, some 20, 30 people ended up breaking the record. It was like unbelievable. And so I think the potential of human imagination is just incredible. So no, thank you for sharing that. That's very inspiring. The other question I have for you, Yichao, is like, growing up, whom did you idolize? Who were your mentors? And were there any celebrities in the entertainment industry that you looked up to, or who fascinated you?
Honestly, a lot of my mentors were a lot more intimate than like celebrities. And I think ultimately that, for me at least personally, that helped ground me a little bit more than, like it was a little bit more tangible and a little bit more grounded in things that were let me see if I could start that answer over again. I think growing up, a lot of my mentors and big people who inspired me were actually people that I worked with a lot more intimately rather than big celebrities, in the sense of like great teachers and mentors who did phenomenal work and who understood the craft that I was pursuing well. Those people really inspired me to emulate and to grow in that regard. And I think, to me, especially when you talk about things like acting, and there's a lot of complication of like looking at a Tom Cruise or whoever and being like, oh, I want to be them. Because I think when people look at movie stars and these big celebrities, we are more interested and fascinated by the concept of celebrity rather than necessarily by the quality of what they're doing work-wise. Like, what is it that this person is bringing to craft-wise to whatever it is they do, to the performance or whatever. To me, somebody who's like, I want to be a celebrity, ultimately is chasing something that can't be satisfied by their own selves. Like, celebrity comes from external people bequeathing it upon you, looking to you and giving you this like adoration or attention. Whereas if your goals are more inspired by craft and work and skill and technique, that is going to drive you to be able to do things to obtain the things that you admire. That doesn't mean you can't admire those things in celebrities. For me, though, it was a lot more useful and a lot more natural to find those in the people and artists that I was working with and surrounding myself with. In terms of playwriting, it was meeting playwrights who I thought wrote phenomenal plays that aren't going to be, famous in terms of the wider breadth of people, but whose work I really enjoyed and who I looked up to as in terms of the craft. If I had to list one big celebrity whose words had a big impact on me, there would be two. Ira Glass and Steve Martin. Steve Martin, for the quote that you mentioned, was actually the title of a book that you mentioned earlier, Be So Good They Can't Ignore You. I think Steve Martin said that in response to, what advice do you give to young aspiring comedians? And I think that advice, more than anything else, kind of serves as just a really great kind of goalpost and centering idea of, it's not about anything else. It's about whatever you do, just getting really, really good at doing it. Because if you're great, everything else will come after that. And until you're great, everything else doesn't really matter. Because if you're not good enough to do the thing, even if the opportunities present themselves, you're not going to be ready. And the reason for Ira Glass is his quote about the gap between a person's taste and their ability to create in the artistic field that they're endeavoring in. If you don't know the quote, you can look it up. But basically, allowing me to paraphrase poorly, he talks about how when we are motivated to start doing an artistic thing, it's because we have a really refined sense of taste of it. We know what we love about the thing we're doing, whether it's comedy or performing, whatever it is. We know what it looks like when you're good at it. But when we start doing it, you're not good right away. You're actually probably bad at it. And so there's this gap between what you can make and what you know is good. And most people give up because they feel like they're no good at it. But the secret is, you're going to be bad for a while until you gain the skills to be so good they can't ignore you, right? So for me, the combination of these two quotes really helps to drive me in terms of how I approach the things I do. long-winded answer to what mentors I look up to.
No, that's great. I think you made some really awesome points there, and I think what I'm hearing, the message is about mastery. It's about like really pursuing a craft and not giving up, because you can expect those roadblocks early on. And I think that's the common rookie mistake a lot of people do is, the first sign of failures or setbacks, they give up on something they were passionate about. And I think.
I think it's also important, like that is definitely one part of it. And the other half of it is not setting your goals to be markers of success other people would look at and define as such. In terms of like in business of like, oh, I want to make X amount of money and that's what's important. It's like that actually is a byproduct of you having a great, business and idea that you're executing. If it goes well, you're gonna make money. But if that's your goal, you might be very unhappy even if you've created a very successful business because you haven't hit an imaginary success benchmark of dollars. Same thing in acting, right? I want to win an Oscar is a much less useful goal than I want to, create performances that move people because ultimately whether or not you win an Oscar is not up to you. It's, just ask Leonardo DiCaprio. And like and you've got to set goals and shoot for things that actually help you become better at doing the thing you do.
Yep, I agree. That's nicely stated. So my next question to you is, Yichao, is what's your definition, having worked in this creative field for so many years now and having rubbed shoulders with some of the best performers and artists, what's your definition of success now, and how would you define greatness?
To me personally, success, this ties into what we were just talking about. Success is being able to execute at the top of my craft and to consistently improve that and work with other people to make great work. And I think that it sounds a little soft and a little vague, but ultimately at this point in my life, if I'm making whether it's a show or a project or a piece of writing, and I'm doing it with people that I'm passionate about and I find exciting as artists, I'm less. It doesn't worry me about how big the audience is or whatever else. I'm more excited by, is the project itself exciting to me? And if it is, then it's worth doing and it's worth doing well. And if it goes well, then that is successful. And again, a byproduct of that might be a lot of people will see it. A byproduct of that might be the video game I'm designing, gets X number of sales per unit, whatever it is. But ultimately what satisfies and excites me and I count as success is, did I do it well? And was it a thing worth doing well? And if so, going for it full steam.
Oh, I like it. And anything on greatness? Any thoughts on what's a life well-lived and great life? Anybody that comes to mind?
Any people that I feel are great?
Or any artist, performer, or anybody that, when you think of greatness, who's the person that comes to mind for you?
That's a great question. Yeah. I guess I just don't think in those terms a lot because I think to me, I don't know, like that is not something I spend a lot of brain space on, of focusing on like who is great and will I be great. Like I think a great playwright is Sam Hunter, who is a playwright who, unless your audience are pretty deep theater nerds, might not have heard of, but is writing incredibly moving and phenomenal work. I think there's a lot of people in the variety of fields I've gotten to dabble in, comedy, such playwriting, all of this that are doing phenomenal work that I admire. Like obvious one for comedy, Louis C.K. Everyone, he's kind of the most famous guy right now, I feel like. But I think he's been doing some really great stuff for a while. But I think for the most part, I don't spend a lot of time worrying about who's great, and more it's like if I consume something awesome, I'm like, oh, I want to take note of what this person is doing. But for the most part, it's about focusing on what you're doing rather than worrying about needing to live up to or pin on the wall some other person's accomplishment as the great thing that you hope to one day make, right? Like, make your own thing, and if it's going to be great, it's going to be great. And if it's not great, you're going to make something better the next time you do it, I guess.
That's really a fantastic answer, because I think, the same question when you ask someone in the different domain, like the business field or the technology field, you get a different answer as to, there's a benchmark or the certain numbers to achieve. And I think in the space of performance and creativity, I think it's, as you stated very early on, that it's very subjective, right? It's, what makes great for one person may not be great for the other person, right?
Sure. Well, I would argue even in business, though, sure, you can say Elon Musk is great because he has built this huge empire and it's $1 billion blah, blah, blah. And yes, you can set that as, you can definitely say that's great. And I would agree. But how useful is it to set that as your benchmark and your own measurement of success against that yardstick, right? To me, it's not so useful, because ultimately, if you're concerned, it's about where are you setting your focus? Is it the byproduct of greatness, which is billions of dollars made, X units sold, or is it the core thing that inspired that person to become great? Which is, for Elon Musk, he's like, I want to change the world in terms of I don't know him well. I might be projecting here, and this might not be accurate, but to me, it feels like his MO is, I want to change the world and make the world a better place because I believe in renewable energy. And that drives all of his greatness. And if you are equally passionate about renewable energy, yes, that's what you should be setting your benchmark against. But I don't think it's useful to be like, unless I sell 1 billion units or revolutionize an industry, I am not great. I think it's more useful of observe that passion and find what problem makes you as hungry to solve it as Elon Musk is hungry to solve the energy problem. Why is Google great? Because they want to organize all of the information in the world. It's a huge task, but they're like, we're really hungry to solve this problem, and they're great because they are chasing that problem. They're not great because they're the number one search engine. That's a byproduct of the thing that made them great.
I like that. That's really beautifully elaborated on. Thank you for sharing that. That's really a fresh perspective on this. Awesome. So we're going to move on to our next section. These are some of the questions we have gotten from our audience. So the first question is, and what's your advice to an aspiring comedy writer? What would you say, where do they start? Is comedy that you can even write comedy, and can anyone write comedy, or some people are more inclined and talented to write comedy? What would you suggest?
So I have very strong opinions about this concept of talent. I think, some people might have a better natural inclination to do anything, whether it's piano, especially in the arts field. Some people might be slightly more naturally inclined, but that gives you a maybe 1% advantage in the long run. Ultimately, it's about craft. Ultimately, it's about work. Ultimately, it's about getting better and putting in the time and the hours and the work to improve and learn how to do a thing. Absolutely, you can learn how to write comedy. And it's a thing of putting in a lot of time and learning and breaking down people who you admire, of what they're doing, observing what they're doing, finding your own voice, discovering what things you find funny, and being brave enough to share it. I think my advice would be, one, whatever art thing you want to make, consume a lot of it. If you want to be a game designer, play a lot of games. And don't just play it as a player. Play it with a critical eye of what is the gameplay pattern that's exciting here. If you want to be a playwright, read a lot of plays. What are these playwrights doing structurally in terms of storytelling? If you want to be a comedian, watch a ton of stand-up and break down how they're setting up their jokes. Consume a lot of what you want to consume, and know that it's just going to take a lot of work to get good at it. You're going to be bad at it. and it's okay to be bad. And I know when I was, starting into theater and playwriting, and somebody's like, you're going to be bad for 3 to 5 years. And I was like, I can't wait 3 to 5 years to write something good. No way. But that is being patient, I think, is another big piece. Like, so consuming a lot of the thing you want to make, allowing yourself to be bad, being patient with yourself as you're getting better, and really knowing that it's not like there's this magical talent fairy that either you have or you don't. It's, are you willing to put in the work? Are you willing to keep putting in the work? Are you willing to work harder than other people and put in more work and keep going when other people would give up, and work until you've made something that is worthwhile?
That's awesome. The next question is, what is the secret to being a good improviser? Like I remember, and Yichao, you're like one of the best that I've seen, at least in my comedy and theater fan career, if you will. And so I know we talked about those 5 or 6 steps. Do you want to kind of run down through those real quick, or is there any other points that you want to talk about? I think I know the first one that you drilled us into all our in the workshop was yes and. And that was
sure. I think when you break down. So the question, I guess, is what's the secret to being a good improviser? And the secret is, along with every other creative field, there is no secret. I think in every field, the basics are really simple. And when you hear them, you're like, oh, that's it? Oh, well, okay. But then learning actually how to execute on these seemingly simple concepts is a lifetime pursuit, right? Like, for me, writing has been that. When you break it down, writing is about, there's techniques of structure and organization that you learn. There's techniques of, crafting a narrative. And then once you learn those techniques, it's just about getting better at doing it. Improv is the same. There's some basic rules and guidelines. Yes and. More important than yes and, I would say, is listening. The secret to improv maybe is listening, if there's any secret, of just listening to your partner and then reacting honestly. And when you say listen to your partner and react honestly, it's a very simple sentence, but learning how to actually do that and then getting good at it is a whole nother thing. I think like sometimes young artists will start learning a craft and they'll be told these basic things. They'll be like, okay, yeah, sure. But what's the hard stuff? What's the really the advanced stuff? And ultimately, all of the advanced concepts to me are kind of icing on the cake. But you've got to have these fundamentals of the basics that makes up the body of the cake. And no matter how advanced you get in any field, coming back to these basics and running the drills, right? Like in piano, playing your scales, whatever it is, you've got to come back and do those and make sure those are strong and you find more depth at each time you do it, more so than any of the fancy, more complicated concepts. I guess the secret to being a great improviser is just you got to keep doing it and to get better at the basics.
That's awesome. The next question is, what, in your opinion, stops people from achieving their full potential?
I think a lot of the times it's fear and being told they can't. I think. Or them not realizing that they can go further and do more. One of my favorite exercises that I teach every time when I teach a beginning improv class is I say, okay, guys, what I want you to do is clap as loud as you can. And the class will clap and cheer and hoot and holler. I'm like, great. Guys, if you can clap louder than that, I'll give each of you $5 right now out of my wallet. And then they clap and cheer and it's louder and it's louder. And you're like, great, okay, awesome. Tell you what, if you guys can clap even louder than that, I will refund your tuition money for this class. And they clap even louder. And the whole point of the exercise is to say, okay, my first request was clap as loud as you can. And then you exceeded that several times over the course of this exercise, right? So where we think is our maximum is oftentimes not anywhere close to where our maximum is. And I think one is trusting that you can do more. is a part of achieving your true potential. And then the other is like not letting other voices, whether your own internal voices or people around you, sometimes well-meaning supportive people telling you can't, or you shouldn't, or you should slow down, or you should step back, or you should be more realistic, or whatever it is. However the words come out, what they're saying is like, hey, maybe you don't have to try so hard, or maybe you might get hurt. Don't do the thing. And it's really tough because sometimes those voices have a point of like everything in moderation, finding the healthy way to pursue your goals. But oftentimes, I think the most cliche and obvious example is like, you want to be an actor, and a very well-meaning aunt is like, well, actors don't make money, and do you really think this is what you want to spend your time on? And when you're older, you're going to regret not having a more stable career and saving up money, and and all of these very reasonable reasons why you shouldn't chase after the thing you want and chase after the potential. And it's a personal call to figure out where and when to listen to that, and where and when to push beyond it. I think as much as I want to say, you don't know your potential and push harder, I also want to add in the caveat of like doing so healthfully and doing so with a idea and a concept of, whether that's a physical limits or even emotional limits or whatever else of chasing your potential, but not at the point of pushing yourself to harming yourself. Right. So, yeah, I think all of that factors into how far along a person can achieve against their own imagined potential.
Yep, that's nicely stated. And one other question within this segment is, if you could go back in time, let's say, Yichao, we have a hypothetical situation here, a time machine, and you could go back in time and talk to your young self, let's say your 20-year-old self, what advice would you give him? Be patient. You don't have to have written the next great American novel or the next great play by the time you're 25, so stop pushing yourself to. But be hungry. Really be focusing on the craft of what you're doing rather than what you think success looks like. Don't worry about fame. Don't worry about, writing a thing that is the next Shakespeare thing. Just worry about what excites you and what you can do to get better at the things you're chasing. And also, nothing will go according to plan. And be prepared for that in the sense of be ready to be open to change. And because when I was 20, I was studying theater and playwriting, and now I write for video games and also continue to write plays, but, have a whole career in, game development that was not a part of that. And that only happened by trying to stay open. So I would just but there was a lot of fear and trepidation and uncertainty and doubt of like, am I doing the right thing? And I just want to tell younger self, it's okay. It's going to work out all right. Go forth. Yeah, like that. It's like being patient, be hungry, and being open to possibilities. And because life doesn't always go according to plan, and I can totally second that as well. I think that's really very true. Moving on to our next section, which is the rapid fire round. This is like our fun section. I'm going to ask you a bunch of quick questions, and it's the kind of our style of an improv here. It's the first thing that comes to your mind. And of course, if you want to elaborate on it, feel free to do so. But again, this is the rapid fire round. So are you ready, Yichao? I am ready. All right. So the first question is, what rock star has impressed you? The first thing that came to my mind was Taylor Swift. Okay. Okay, if you could be successful in another profession, which would you choose? I would choose soccer player. Okay, the next question. The greatest work of art. Oh, man. The greatest work of art is obviously talking myself in a corner.
It is.
Hey, this is the improv time, buddy.
Oh no!
No pressure.
Okay, it's definitely
no pressure.
The Sistine Chapel.
All right, no, that's great. If you could have witnessed one event in history.
The assassination of Abraham Lincoln.
Okay, the single most valuable thing you've learned in life.
Love people. Don't be a jerk.
Okay. And if God exists, can she be trusted?
I think that's been proven to be no, but that's okay, and it'll be all right.
And if you could have any message of your choice on a billboard, what would that be?
Don't look behind you.
Got it. Awesome. So this wraps up our rapid fire section, and we are moving on to our final section, and that is the wrap up round. And so I just have 3 questions for you here. And the first question is, what is your current personal or business passion project that you're working on, and what are you looking forward to over the next 6 months to a year?
Let's see. I'm working on 2 big things in terms of personal passion projects. One is a solo improvised show called Pint of Life. It's a show involving ice cream, and I perform it. I've performed it at a lot of different places, but the next place will be at the Vancouver Fringe Festival as part of the Canadian Fringe Festival. I'll be performing in Vancouver, BC for 2 weeks, so I'm pretty excited for that. The other project I'm working on is a improvised musical. So basically there's a cast of performers. They make up a musical on the spot each night. It's about the musical is called Dystopia! The musical. So it's about the end of the world and a dystopic future, but it's all done in song and dance. So it should be a lot of fun. I've been developing the show for a while. We open October 5th. And it runs every Thursday and Friday at 8 p.m. at Jet City Improv. You can find out more information about that show at jetcityimprov.org.
Great. And how can people reach you and contact you if they have any opportunities or questions or anything if they want to reach you? What's the best way to get hold of you?
You can find me at Twitter at Michael Yichao. I also have a website, michaelyichao.com. You can contact me via the contact page.
Yes, and we'll include, for the benefit of the audience, we'll include all those show links in our notes here. And the next question is, what are 3 things you're grateful for in life today?
Today, I am very grateful for my family. I think they are a big part of why I've gotten to do the things I've gotten to do, how hard my mom has worked to provide the resources for me to become the person I am and to accomplish the things I have. I'm grateful for awesome friends who are generous with their time and kind and full of supportive energy when I need it. Friends who I can talk to at 3 a.m. when I have moments of crushing doubt on a project, and they're like, "Shut up, Yichao, you're going to be fine." And I am grateful for this city. I've loved Seattle, and it's been a cool environment where I've gotten to meet a lot of really great people and find a lot of fun new ventures and venues to do fun projects and have success and have a career that I'm really enjoying. So, yeah.
No, that's awesome. So I would like to acknowledge you, Yichao, for a couple of things. One, that for really being generous with your time and being such a role model for our community, because you are really leading the way and showing us what's possible with making bold choices like theater and improv and being a player, being a writer and showing us what comedy can do for just the creative aspect of our lives and the community. I mean, with your contribution to the Jet City Improv, it's been such a phenomenal community giving back to Seattle. I think a lot of people have benefited from your workshops, and they continue to enjoy your blog posts, and it's such an amazing contribution that you're making to the community. And also the fact that having having a love for your family and friends, and just being just being a great guy. That's what comes to mind. And so thank you for, again, taking the time to be on the show. Really appreciate that.
Thanks for the kind words, and thank you for everything you do, Cal.
My pleasure. And one final question, and this is how we wrap up all our interviews, and that is, why do you think people should listen to the Wisdom of Friends?
I think there's a lot to be said about just friends just chatting about life and things, and I always enjoy listening in on those conversations and being part of those conversations, and welcome you guys as the audience to come listen with us and join the conversation, reaching out to Cal and I. So
awesome. So thank you again for your time and candid answers. I truly valued our conversation and appreciate you taking the time on this program. And for those of us listening, with that, we'll wrap it up. And if you like what you heard, please share. Don't be shy. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Wisdom of Friends show with Cal Arras. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, theglobalcontribution.com. To your friends and colleagues, be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous episodes. This has been a Seven Symphonies production. Join us next time for another edition of the Wisdom of Friends.